I'd like to introduce Lynn Holt, who will introduce our session and speaker for today.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the final presentation, as Julianne has just said. And I think we got a better understanding, at least I hope we did, of the voters and their proclivities during the course of this class, So it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Adejumo, who is from Tampa, Florida, and is a 2008 graduate of the Florida State University, earning a bachelor's of science degree in business administration and triple majoring in business management, management information systems, and human resource management. That's a lot of management. Dr. Adejumo received his PhD in 2015 from the University of Florida's Political Science Department, majoring in policy and administration. He is currently a full-time lecturer in the African American Studies program at UF, and he teaches Intro to African American Studies, The Wire, Mentoring at-risk Youth, Black Wall Street, and Black Masculinity. Dr. Adejumo was selected as the Professor of the Year by the UF Black Student Union for the 2015-2016 school year, and he was also selected as the Professor and Advisor of the Year by the UF College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for the 2017-2018 school year. So thank you very much for coming, especially on your day off on Veterans Day. And I will turn it over to you, Dr. Adejumo.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I greatly appreciate the introduction, greatly appreciate the invite to be here. And so what I was asked to do today, well, first of all, I also want to give a shout out to Lynn Leverty. I saw that she was on the call. She actually served on my dissertation committee at the University of Florida. So just wanted to shout out Dr. Leverty and thank her for all that she's done for me and continue to do. So with that said, I was asked to execute the task to inform you all about Black voters here in Florida. And you know, it's a very particular subject because Black voters in Florida is not a monolith. You know, people think it's a monolith, but it's really not, because you know you have a bevy of different ethnicities of Black here in Florida. You have obviously African Americans, those who are descendants of the enslaved, and then you also have immigrants as well, being from Jamaica or be it from Haiti. Those are the largest immigrants that are Black here in Florida. But also you have Africans, of which my father is from Nigeria. So you have a lot of Nigerians here in Florida, Nigerian immigrants here in Florida, second generation. So again, so when we discuss Black voters, keep in mind that everything is not a monolith, especially if you're talking about politically or beliefs. So we'll go over all of that in the presentation. So what I want to do is, before we even get started with that, I want to talk about the history of voting in Florida. And I want to particularly point out the Ocoee massacre. How many of you are familiar with the Ocoee massacre? How many of you know where Ocoee is? So many of you are shaking your head. No, so we can, so it's another educational opportunity here. So Ocoee is right outside of Orlando. So it's right outside of Orlando, right on the Apopka, Lake Apopka. Obviously Apopka is also a city within Orange County, but Ocoee is not too far from downtown Orlando. Give or take about 20 minutes from downtown Orlando. It's considered a suburb of Orlando. But it's its own city, its own mayor, its own council people. And but what many people don't know, many people heard of Rosewood, but what many people do not know, which I do, I conduct lectures on Rosewood, not only in my Black Wall Street course, in the intro course, but also for the Florida Humanities Council. But what many people don't know is that there was a massacre of Black people in Ocoee. And so just to give you the facts of that, that occurred on November 2nd, 1920, Election Day. So bonus question, who were the candidates for the 1920 election, national election? You could just, if you could just drop it in the chat, that would be great. So yeah, so who were the candidates for the 1920 election? Okay, okay, Harding, there we go. So who did he run against? Who did he run against? Okay, so on that day, that fateful day, November 2nd, 1920, Mose Norman pulled his car up, who was a Black man, Mose Norman, pulled his car up to the Ocoee polling precinct that morning to vote, and he was denied. So when Norman returned to Ocoee, gunshots were fired. Norman escaped, again, a Black man, that night, and into the next morning, Colonel Sam Salisbury, who was white, rallied a mob of as many as 200 white men from around the region to find Norman. So they surrounded the home of Norman's friend, July Perry. More gunfire ensued. The people living in Ocoee's Black community ran for safety. And so now it's important to note in Ocoee, it was unique in the sense of, it wasn't a situation where Black people lived on one side of the town and white people lived on the other side. They kind of were intermixed a little bit, but obviously everyone knew where everyone stayed at because it was a small town. And so Ocoee's Black community ran for safety. So some were caught, some were shot, and some were never heard from again. So Perry, July Perry, was actually shot, beaten, jailed. He was dragged, and he was also lynched. So the 1920 census says that 255 Black residents and 560 white residents lived in Ocoee. So within months of the Election Day massacre, no more than 2 Black residents remained. And it remained that way for the past, up until the early 1980s. And so stories over the years have said between 30 and 80 Black people died that night. So it depends on who you talk to. So I wanted to start off with that just to kind of set the tone as far as what Black people here in Florida, I mean, we could say in America, there you go, James Couch, there we go. What Black people in not only America, but in Florida had to endure just to even get to the point of voting, right? So there were massacres, which happened in Ocoee, obviously happened in also Rosewood, which wasn't necessarily political. It was just a straight racist assault against Black people. But again, obviously you had the poll tax. So just different things preventing Black people from being able to vote. And now we have, different things going on with gerrymandering. We have even the Senate bill, the current Senate bill going on with DeSantis curbing early voting. And, the University of Florida was front and center in that news the past 2 weeks due to President Fox initially and the administration and even, the deans writing letters saying that colleagues of mine could not serve as expert witnesses in that case, which was filed against the state. So obviously, President Fox and the administration had to reverse course on that. But obviously, the issue regarding that is, the roadblocks that are continually put in place of voters, right? So you could say, oh, Black votes, minority votes. I'm just going to say voters in general with that ruling, because many voters of all colors live in places and would be affected by that bill that was signed. So it's an interesting thing. So now let's look at the Florida voting demographics. So the overall population of Florida is 21 million, 21.5 million roughly. So it's 16.9% Black, African American. And again, keeping in mind when I say Black, We're talking about it's a mix of Black, not just strictly those African Americans who are descendants from the enslaved. Then we have 53% white, 26.4% Hispanic. And so you may ask the question, well, why do we feel the need to do or to categorize the demographics of race? Well, because it plays an important part really of every fabric in life, but especially in politics and especially in Florida. For if it didn't, we wouldn't have the discussion of critical race theory in our class, right? So we wouldn't have that discussion going on Capitol in Tallahassee regarding critical race theory of it being good or bad if race wasn't important. So typically, so age 65 and older, 21% of Floridians, age 18 to 64, 59%, and underage is also about 21%. So the average income for 2019 for Black was $45,700. For white was $62,764, and Latino was $54,326. And then also for the poverty rate, the overall rate in Florida was 22.7%, but of that, was 12.7%. But of that 12.7%, 22% of Blacks are classified as being in poverty, white at 10%, and Latino is at 18%. And so again, you may ask Dr. Adejumo, well, why we have to classify in that demographic? Well, we have to classify in that demographic because that affects the issues that people are going to be concerned with. So, if you're of a higher bracket as far as income, or a lower bracket as far as income, that's going to affect the issues that your outlook of how you see issues is going to be a little bit different depending on what bracket you're in. And so that's regardless of race, but then also the issue of race is going to be of interest is because, especially here in Florida, because as I said before, it doesn't matter if you're a Black person in a higher tax bracket or a lower tax bracket, certain issues, as we said before, as it pertains to education, as it pertains to business development, as it pertains to all those different things are going to, as it pertains to police brutality, all those different things are going to be of issue to you regardless. So again, this is why we look at those numbers as far as the income, the poverty rate, the age. Obviously, age is going to be different as far as the issues. A person that's 18 may not care about the same issues as a person who is 65 and older. So said another way, a person that is 18 is not going to necessarily care about Medicare. So unless they are the caregiver to their whoever they're taking care of, who may be of that age. All right, so let's look at state party affiliations. So overall, Republican was 5,218,000, Democrat 5,315,000, no party affiliation 3,799,000. Obviously, in national politics, the no party affiliation is of great importance and serves as to why people classify Florida as a purple state. Is one of the reasons why Obama won it by 200,000, but why Trump barely won it. So again, and even in recent times, there's been great concern among the Democratic Party regarding their shrinkage the shrinkage of voter registrations as far as what they're registered for versus Republicans. So said another way, I believe right now there's a 20,000 gap between Democratic registration they only registered 20,000 more than Republican in the state. So if we break it down by race, Black Republican 8%, white Republican 48%, and Latino Republican 27%. If we look at Black Democrat, it's 76%, white Democrat 37%, Latino Democrat 45%. And if we look at no party affiliation, Black no party 15%, white no party 15%, and Latino 28%. So again, this is the reason why when you think about different issues in the state that are wedge issues, and you see a lot of focus on the Latino community, and rightfully so by the two parties, because again, looking at the statistics, black folk are dug in their position for the most part at 76%. White is pretty much pretty even, but still, Latino Latinos are the swing vote. It could go either way. So, which is why there's particular, it's funny. I was joking with some people in my circle who are black, and they asked the question, well, why does Joe Biden focus so much about with Latinos when he comes to Florida? I was like, well, you have to look at the statistics. Whether it's a situation of benign neglect or not, the statistics are the statistics. 28% are no party affiliation. So it's just a matter of leverage, and that also plays a part in our state politics as well, as far as the different issues, especially concerning immigration, especially concerning education, especially concerning when you talk about welfare benefits, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare, all those different things play a part and tend to break along party lines. And so, so again, as I said before, Latinos are really the swing vote or in a lot of those issues. All right. So previous issues of Black voters. So previous issues of Black voters included voting rights. So as I show you here, here's a poll tax receipt. If you're not familiar with what a poll tax is what you were charged to vote, and particularly Black people were charged this poll tax, especially after 1865. So again, other voting rights issues such as gerrymandering, civil rights issues that in the past include existing in public spaces. And when I say that, I'm accounting for the massacres that took place in Florida between Ocoee massacre, the Rosewood massacre. There were, I wouldn't call it necessarily a massacre, but killings in McClenny, Florida. You had killings in Perry, Florida, multiple. That was based on racial, that was classified as racial violence. So again, existing in public spaces, right? So that's a really big thing as far as, I would even go so to classify more so as human rights, in addition to civil rights, also human rights as well. Also police brutality. And then we talk about education, discrimination, access to resources, busing. In my family, busing was a really, hearing my parents talk about, specifically my mom talk about busing here when she was coming up in school. And she grew up in the Tampa area. She grew up in Tampa, and she was telling me that she went to an all-Black high school called Middleton High School. And so what she was telling me was that a lot of Black people really didn't care too much about integration. It wasn't necessarily about integration. It's just the fact that they wanted equal access to the resources, to the educational resources. They didn't necessarily want to be bused to white schools. And, they just wanted equal access. So they just wanted, to not have raggedy textbooks or, to have access to the football fields to be on equal level playing field or, but other than that, my parents tell me that the teachers was fine. The atmosphere was great. It was a great learning environment at the all-Black high school that they went to in the 60s, but they didn't really care to be bussed out to the white schools in suburbia, but that was what happened. And, that was a particular issue, especially here in Florida. And it actually still is an issue here. The idea of, well, if we, not only with busing, but magnet schools also play a part in that as well. Obviously that went away. I believe that went away as far as a federal mandate in 2001. but still it's of a, you know, and now we have different things going on. We have the school vouchers, you know, you have splinter districts, some splinter school districts here. So again, it's just different things that kind of muddy the whole idea of using busing as an integration tool. But again, those are the previous issues of just some issues, not all, but I'm just saying some issues here in Florida. All right, so issues today, again, still the idea of civil rights, still the idea of existing in public spaces. I mean, you think about the mandate that was enacted about protesters being able, so somebody could run their car, run over a protester, you know. So again, that has a particular tinge, especially for our young Black voters here in Florida, because, you know, a lot of them have protested. I, including one of them, back in when I was in college, you know, protested when Martin Lee Anderson case happened, you know. And so again, the idea that somebody could run me over if I'm protesting and not get charged for it, you know, that is an issue. Obviously, stand your ground is an issue with a lot of Black voters. Police brutality still is an issue. Then we talk about today, Black business development being of a particular issue. You know, how many grants are being offered in individual counties? How many grants are being offered at the state level? You know, how many incubator programs that we have? So all those different things are of our particular issues to Black voters today. And then obviously, I think this is the issue that is pertinent to everyone, but especially particular to Black people as far as the health disparities. You know, when you're talking about coronavirus and you're talking about the number of people being hospitalized and being negatively affected by that virus has been disproportionately been African Americans here in Florida as a percentage. And then we talk about the school to prison pipeline system. And so that's the idea that in school suspensions, you know, that different prison companies look at different suspension rates, and based off of those rates that they see, particularly of Black students, they go on to build their prisons, not public prisons. We're talking about private contractors. So not only just building prisons, but also when you talk about the amount of food that needs to be delivered, the amount of beds that need to be made, the amount of sheets that need to be shown, all those things are based off of statistics, readily available public data, as far as who is getting suspended and the demographic of who's getting suspended. So again, that's the idea of that. And Dream Defenders has been doing incredible work, of whom some who were my students, but they have been doing incredible work on the school to prison pipeline to address that issue. All right, so future issues. So again, we talked about voter suppression. And again, it's a very, very highly charged subject. I don't mind talking about it because, you know, at the end of the day, the truth is the truth. But, you know, with what went on with just recently and rising together, the firm that's filed a lawsuit against the state, and then that firm asking the professors in political science to serve as expert witnesses, and then the administrators trying to block that, you know, on the basis of so-called conflict of interest. You know, it's a really, 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 it shows you the highly, highly contentious issue of just the idea of voter suppression in general, because you have to ask the question, well, why is it such a big deal if professors serve as expert witnesses in cases against the state? I mean, that's been done plenty of times before. That's a common practice. So why is it just an issue now? Because everyone knows that 2024 is pretty much the crossroads of this state, and even this country maybe. So again, voter suppression is still an issue. I wouldn't even classify it as a future. It's an issue now, obviously, given the events, but it definitely will be a future issue depending on how everything plays out with this case. And there's other things going on. And then you have immigration, obviously, is going to be a continual issue, even especially for Black voters. Think about what happened recently with those Haitian immigrants who are trying to come in from Texas, right? Obviously, they were trying to come in from Texas, so you may ask, well, how does this affect Florida? Because many of those Haitian immigrants have family in Florida. And so, and it's still a lot of Black immigrants in the community. You know, they can, you know, it's a contentious issue because, you know, they ask the question, well, how is it, for example, a Cuban refugee can receive the support from the state, from the government, you know, but a Haitian refugee does not receive that same support. You know, so why is that? Is it an issue of race? Is it politics? Is it, you know, is it still because of remnants of Castro? Why is it that the Haitian refugees do not receive the same support? And in fact, you know, in many cases are deported compared to Cuban refugees, right? So it's just a question that's asked in the Black immigrant community. Not saying one is wrong or one is right. It's just a question, and which is why it's an issue. Obviously, the education achievement gap in Florida is continually widening. I have personal concerns. I'm waiting to see the numbers as far as, I didn't use numbers for that because, you know, we're still waiting on the numbers from the pandemic. You know, a lot of test scores were delayed or were not done by different counties. So the data is sketchy right now currently. When it comes to education, especially K through 12 education. But I am particularly concerned because what I hear from parents about, you know, their students, you know, during the time last year that many of them had to stay home and many of them fell back behind, you know, unfortunately. So I'm very interested in that data, and that is an issue not only now but also a contentious issue that will be in the future, because then the question becomes, you know, how much tax dollars are going to be diverted from public schools and into the voucher program or into other types of educational or even online. I mean, you look at the online company K-12. That was a big, huge thing last year. I think they kind of tamped down a little bit now, but a lot of students in the state went to K-12, or they went to their individual, or they went to Florida virtual schools, or they went to their individual district online schools. So again, this online, and I'm a person, I'm all for online, but it's a certain way it has to be done. And so that is going to be a definitely big issue coming up for 2022 and 2024. And then finally, you look at the employment, you look at the wages. Obviously, Florida voted to increase the minimum wage, which is great, but unfortunately, and that doesn't take place for another 4 years. And then also, inflation is going crazy right now. I think it's like at 6.2%, the highest it's been since 1990. And so that is definitely going to affect Florida voters, and especially Black voters who are already at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to employment wages. And so yes, minimum wage has gone up, but what has also gone up is the price of beef, the price of chicken. I was in the store the other day and I was like, man, $30 for beef? And this would have been $10 a couple of months ago. And so now $30. So again, it's hitting people's pockets very hard. And I like to grill, but I can't grill as much as I used to. But anyway, so these are definitely some kitchen table issues, not only for everybody, but specifically to Black voters. And I wanted to leave some slack time. Good. I wanted to leave at least 30 minutes for questioning and just have some general conversation. So with that said, I am concluding my presentation, and I want to go ahead and open up the floor for dialogue.
There's a question in the chat. Does the economic strata influence voting of Hispanics? Does their country of origin matter?
No, that's a great question because again, many of Latino voters, as I said before, they are classified as no party affiliation. But many of them, those that of that no party affiliation, tend to vote Republican, especially in national issues. So you ask the question, does the economic strata influence voting? I would definitely say yes, because if you're let's say you're a business owner, many of Latino, and I don't have the exact numbers, but many of them are business owners. So that's going to affect how you vote, especially if you're talking about taxes, issues of business taxes, and that type of thing. And you see on the news here about the Biden administration is talking about the tax on people making over 400,000. Well, that also includes businesses. So that's going to affect how people may vote. Maybe they may be a single issue voter, and that's all they care about is their taxes. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that may be the situation versus someone who, and also, even when you're talking about Latino voter, not only are you talking about the economic strata, but you're also talking about, when you say their country of origin, someone who's a second generation Latino who may identify as white may think differently as far as they vote versus someone from the Latino community who is of darker hue and from a different country. So again, yes, it all plays a part, whether you're talking about the economic strata, when you're talking about Latino, again, many of them may identify as Black, especially that's the situation where you're talking about Puerto Ricans, or you're talking about Cubans who may identify as Black. So yes, so all of that has an effect on how they vote and how they may see issues.
Okay, thank you. Anne Marie, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying your talk, and I think I have a lot more to learn from you. One of the things that I understood from previous lectures by previous speakers was that the Democratic Party seems to be losing men, especially young men, and the two groups that were singled out were white young men and Black young men. And I don't have an answer for the white young men, but I am interested in hearing what you have to say, any lessons you have to give about young Black men, because it seems to me that one of the identifiers that's used to describe this group is no political affiliation, and that if they do vote, perhaps they are voting against something or someone, or they're voting against Republicans. But I don't know at this point how you characterize that group, and if you have anything to offer regarding what the Democratic Party should be doing. I'm not saying you're a Democrat, although I certainly am, but I'd like to know what you have to offer in terms of explaining why it is that in the past young Black men used to vote Democratic, and now they don't seem to be voting, or we're losing them.
Well, I think it's a situation where a lot of young Black men are just disenchanted with the whole political process in general, because the question remains, well, what's in it for us? If I go out and vote Democrat, but yet my wages are still stagnant from where they were before, then what's the point? Or if I go out and vote Democrat and I still can walk outside of my house and still get killed because of my skin color and because of my gender, then what does it like? So basically the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of them are exiting the political process in general. And you may say, well, that's a bad thing. Well, some may feel like, until there's a party that speaks to their issues that they go through as a Black male in America, then what's the point of voting? Then what's the point of particularly, especially voting Democrat, especially if it's a situation where it's a lot of talking. And also I have to also say this too, many may feel that Democrats really aren't speaking to Black men. Like, you know, there's a lot of conversation about Black women, and rightfully so, but Democrats aren't really talking about Black men like that. Like, as far as their particular issues, what they have to go through. You know, you may see some things on the news as far as police brutality when those issues arise. But again, that's when those issues arise. It's not a situation where you're speaking to the issue to actually prevent the issue from occurring. You're just commenting and you're just reacting towards what the lived condition and experience of these people are. So again, the question is that it's not a situation of why Black men don't vote Democrat. The question should be, why aren't the Democrats really doing or presenting a platform to really get at that group, to really speak to their needs and to what their particular issues? Because, and then you have to also understand too, a lot of Democrats, when you start talking about law and order, and you start talking about you know, these different initiatives, like kind of similar to what Clinton did in the 90s. You know, a lot of people wasn't paying attention, but when you talk about 3 strikes and you talk about the crime bill, a lot of Black male voters look at that. You know, it wasn't Republicans who perpetuated that crime bill. It was Biden, it was Clinton, and even Biden in the 1980s had 3 crime bills, you know, in the 80s, starting in 82. And then you look at the crack disparity, you know, a person getting caught with crack versus a person getting caught with pure cocaine, you know, so all of those different issues, Black males remember those things. And so it's a situation of, if they want the vote, you have to do more instead of just offering lip service, and just, you know, you have to do more than just going to the church and saying, oh, we're going to do this and do that for you. No, you have to actually present a platform that's going to speak to their lived experience from an educational level, from a political level, from an economic level. And so right now, many Black males feel like that's not the case with the Democratic Party. So they either vote Republican, they vote third party, or they don't vote at all.
Thank you. Shirley, go ahead.
Well, hello, thank you. We really need your information. You could see a lot of our faces. You could see we're hungry to know more about where you're coming from. But I wonder if you could take a second and kind of tell us how you feel about the new attorney, the secretary, the Surgeon General. What's happening with you and your opinions about it?
Okay, so you're talking about the Surgeon General Latipo, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, again, that was strictly political. I think that was very strategic of DeSantis to use a quote unquote blackface to carry out his agenda of what he wants to do, you know, and to kind of shield himself from criticism. That's what he does. I don't have anything personally against Latipo because I don't know him personally. But what I will, if I ever had a conversation with him, and you know, I guess we're technically colleagues because he's also a professor at the University of Florida. He's employed by UF. You know, and again, it's just another instance of DeSantis using UF as a proxy to carry out his agenda, to carry out what he wants to do. It is very politically astute, but in my opinion, is very dangerous for UF because now you got to start talking about accreditation issues when you're talking about outside political influence, you know. But that's a whole nother story for another day. But as far as Latipo and his hiring, you know, hey, all I can say is get your money. But if I had a conversation with him, I would just inform him that you have to be very cautious because, you know, he's coming from California. I believe he was coming from UCLA. And in Florida politics is much different than California. You know, our history is different. It's very unique. And I think that he may be well-to-do to talk to someone who is maybe a little bit in the know more about what's going on. And therefore, he could make a more informed decision about some of the things that he has done, especially with COVID you know, it's just a lot going on with that.
Yeah, I just wondered if you felt kind of abused by putting a black face that is lacking so much authority in the science field.
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I said, I think, you know, he's just, I think in Latipo's position, I think he's just a little bit green around the ears, so to speak. And he just really doesn't understand politics in Florida. So I can't really say anything positive or negative about him because I don't know him personally. But just evaluating, you know, from taking a step back and just looking at it, it just seems that he's just really caught up in a situation. And to me, it's almost like he's being used between UF and DeSantis for DeSantis to carry out what he wants to do. So.
Thank you. Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I want to talk about voting restrictions. To what extent is the movement for voting restrictions associated with white Christian nationalism?
Okay, so you may say, so what, do you have a question along with that, or?
Well, the question is, of those participating in the movement to restrict voting rights, how much of them are a part of the white Christian nationalist movement?
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying. You know, that's a good question. I haven't really had a chance to look as far as who is actually funding the opposition group as far as for the voting rights and as it pertains to voter suppression, as we talked about before, and particularly that bill that I mentioned about the limiting of the polling stations, the hours, that type of thing. So that's one of the things. Thank you for asking that question. So I want to be more informed before I answer that question. But what I can tell you is that there is a history of white nationalists here in Florida parading around and being involved in the political process to restrict voter suppression. And you can look no further than, as I said before, with the Ocoee massacre. In fact, the KKK sent a letter. I started to say an email, but we didn't have email in 1920. But the KKK sent a letter to the judge, Judge Cheney. He was a white guy, and he was advocating for he was teaching black residents of Ocoee of how to vote. And the KKK sent a letter to him to try to suppress black voters through him, and try to tell him to stop teaching black voters or black citizens on how to vote. So yeah. So as far as your question, yes, there is a history of that here in Florida. But as far as currently today, as far as different white nationalist, Christian white nationalist groups funding the opposition or funding, the opposition to Rising Florida, I can't speak to that because I haven't done enough research on that part of it. But I will, and I'll get back to you on that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you very much. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm particularly interested in gender and female voters. And I know that African-American women have been the mainstay of the Democratic Party for a number of years and were extremely active in this past election and very, very important. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on why that's the case, since African-American women face many of the same issues that you've been talking about that affect Black men. So taking away, the candidacy of Kamala Harris and whatever impact that might have had, how do you explain the difference here between African-American voters who are men and those who are women?
I think it's twofold. I think one, the Democratic Party, as I said before, does an excellent job at marketing towards Black women. They do an excellent job. They do an excellent job as far as the candidates who are Black women, promulgating them. Not only you said about Kamala Harris, but you look at someone like Stacey Abrams. You look at the congressman here in Orlando. Her name is escaping me right now.
Val Demings.
Demings, there we go, Val Demings. So you look at all of those factors as far as who they promote. You know, it's very much so, because as you said, the Democratic Party understand that Black women are going to be there. So and there's a lot of conversation about that, because you know you do have some. I do have Black women in my circle who are more so of the nationalist variety and Black Power variety. And, you know, from our conversations, again, I'm not a Black woman, so I'm not going to pretend to speak for them, but just from my conversations, you know, a lot of them feel like it could be a detriment as well, because, you know, the Democratic Party knows that Black women are going to be there no matter what. So then, you know, so where's the leverage for the Democratic Party to actually put forth issues to address their needs and what they actually need? Because yes, you could put a candidate in front of them that looks like them, but if you don't have actual tangible policy to deal with the everyday issues that they have to go through, one of the main ones is the wage disparity between Black women and white women. You look at many Black women who are single female-headed households, so those particular issues, especially those two, are two issues that that separates, in my opinion, when you talk about Black women issues and issues of non-Black women, particularly white women. You know, that issue, the wage disparity between Black women and white women, and also the single female-headed household, you know, those are really particular issues. And from the women in my circle, they don't think the Democratic Party really do a good job as far as addressing that. But because of the marketing, but not only the marketing, but also many just aren't feeling the Republican Party and their messaging. So, you know, so many just feel like, okay, well, you know, Republicans aren't speaking to my issue, or, you know, they may put somebody like Trump as the forefront, and, you know, and so that scares a lot of people, not just Black women, but just people in general. And so that's why many of them they're going to vote Democrat at a 98% clip, you know? And so versus Black men is, like I said, is just a different issue, you know, in the sense of, you know, as I said before, many Black men may feel that the Democrats aren't speaking to their experience, you know, aren't really putting the marketing to their experience, you know? I mean, obviously you have Barack Obama, but Barack Obama, to many Black men, you know, his experience was very vastly different, because Barack Obama was not the descendant of the enslaved here in America. Barack Obama's dad is from Kenya, and his mom is white. So many Black men feel that his experience is not necessary, or his upbringing is not necessarily the same. Of course, his experience as a Black man, at the end of the day, he faced racism like any other Black person, but his experience just was not the same, you know? So Black men wasn't necessarily, you know, voting at 98% eclipse for Barack Obama as Black women did. So, and then also Michelle Obama played I mentioned Stacey Abrams, I mentioned Kamala Harris, but I failed to mention Michelle Obama. You know, she's very important as well in that equation also. So again, to conclude what I'm saying here, there's a difference between the marketing and what's put forth versus the actual tangible policy, right? And then also, you know, people may look at what Republicans are doing. So that's really the main factors as far as why Black women may vote at the 98% percentile clip versus Black men this last election voted for Biden at 82%. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question here from our Oak Room.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can help me understand more about the term critical race theory. It seems to be so much a part of the dialogue right now. And I've been to Wikipedia, and that didn't really help me very much. And if you could somehow define what it means in a neutral sense, you know, just what the words mean, and then what the positive elements might be and what the negative elements might be, apart from just the way it becomes part of the political conversation.
Oh, sure, sure. So to talk about critical race theory, let's just make it real simple. Critical race theory is the intersection between race and law. Race and law. So as I mentioned to you before, when we talked about busing, right? So those who may examine busing and the politics surrounding, not only the politics surrounding that, but the law. Because remember, busing became a huge thing, and it's starting in about 1972, 71, 72, but that was after the Charlotte-Mecklenburg ruling, if you remember, which happened in 1971, right? So a critical race theorist would study that Supreme Court ruling, not only Charlotte-Mecklenburg, but also obviously you have Brown versus Board of Education, which is, you know, which started all of this, the chain reaction. You have the Civil Rights Act, which had provisions in that act to file for the federal government to file lawsuits, you know, if a school discriminated based on race. So a critical race theorist would take a look at all of those different things: race, law, rulings, and kind of try to put an understanding as far as how it affects our sociological landscape. So if I had to put it all together, let's put it all together. So I took it all apart for you. Now let's put it all together. So if we had to put it all together, we look at the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, right? Supreme Court. We had 1964 Civil Rights Act to enforce that law. And then we had Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which again ruled that busing could be legal. And then you have the individual school districts, in addition to the federal government, really putting in provisions in place to enforce that busing rule, right? So then a critical race theorist will look at that and say, okay, now how did that affect the sociological landscape? Now, how it affected the sociological landscape in that instance was that, okay, like I said before, a lot of people, what they did was they had splinter districts, or white people simply moved away from the inner city into suburbia, right? Or the white parents who had chosen to stay in a neighborhood that was predominantly Black, they just moved their kids to private or parochial schools. So again, so really, so then the question becomes, so was school busing really that effective? A lot of critical race theorists would say, no, it wasn't. But a lot of critical race theorists who may be Black, who may have a nationalist framework, may say that, well, we really didn't need busing. All we needed was just equal access to the resources of the school district. So said another way, we just needed our textbooks not to be crappy, and we needed our textbooks to be in sharp working order, just as much as the white schools. That's all we needed in the Black schools. So we didn't need integration or forced integration or busing or anything like that for our kids, for our Black students to receive a quality education. So again, so that's how a critical race theorist would take a look at those things. And again, I don't know why. I mean, obviously, it's very controversial to some people, because some people just don't want to talk about race because they enjoy how the social order is now. You know, some people just don't want to talk about race, much less do anything about it. So that's why it's become a highly contentious political issue. But I could tell you, among Black circles, it's not really. I mean, it's what it is. This is what we talk. This is what we have to discuss. We have to discuss our lived experience. And critical race theory, in talking about law and in talking about in the intersection of race, it goes hand in hand, especially those of us who are Black and who are in the educational space.
Thank you. John, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. And I'm interested, and it's been interesting. I think you summed up critical race theory very well. But I'm interested in the new voters, the youth that you have contact with at the university level and elsewhere. And I'm just wondering what to expect from the Generation Z and the new voters who happen to identify as Black. And what do you think is coming up?
Oh, thank you so much, Don. That's an excellent question, and that's something I'm also ruminating myself. In addition to having the conversations, maybe try to dig some data as far as the tendency. So I'm working on that myself. But what I can tell you from my personal conversations, and even my own lived experience. I mean, I'm 35 years old, so I'm in the generation of, I guess I'm the Facebook generation. I don't know, but Generation F. But what I can say is from my conversations is that, again, a lot of young people are very just disenchanted. A lot of young Black people are disenchanted in general with the political process because they just don't see the tangible difference. Like they don't see the tangible difference as far as, their parents may say, oh, you have to vote, you got to vote Trump out of office. Okay, you voted Trump out of office. Now what? Like my experience is still the same as if it was Obama, Trump, and now Biden. It's still the same. I'm still getting discriminated against. I'm still having low wages compared to my white counterpart. My starting pay is still not the same. I'm still feeling microaggressions at work. I'm still feeling microaggressions at the University of Florida or whatever other predominantly white institution. So again, a lot of young Black voters are asking the question of why, like, what's the point of this? And so, obviously the older voters may say, well, things come by piecemeal, and you just have to let the process wait itself out. But a lot of young people just aren't interested in waiting itself and in letting the process wait itself out. They either want it now or they choose not to participate. And so I try to counsel young people, look, do as you feel what you should do, but you also have to understand too, because I get it, like you want everything instant and things don't come instantly, right? It doesn't come instantly. I mean, it's not instantly like Instagram. You make a post and you get that instant ting, 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 But at the same time, I do understand that there are certain things that, like for example, there was a forum last night at UF. It was a virtual forum, and they were talking about all these different things that UF wants to do with regarding race and increasing Black student enrollment or increasing Black faculty and staff. And the question came up, well, how is any of this going to be implemented, for one, and two, who's going to actually enforce this? Because the president's office can't enforce it. So is it going to be an outside agency that's going to have an outside lens on it and then kind of ring the bell if the plan is not followed? So again, a lot of young Black people feel the same way as far as the political process is like, basically who's policing the police? If I vote for this person or this process or this party, and this party or this person make all these promises to me, like for example, Biden said he was going to forget, or he endorsed forgiving student loan forgiveness for at least $10,000. I know Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they were more so talking about 50,000, but Biden did tweet in support of 10,000. So now you have a lot of young Black voters who are swimming in college debt, who may have followed the blueprint. You go to college, you stay out of trouble. Now I'm graduating college and I am $80,000 in debt up to my neck. I need some relief. So I vote for you, Mr. Biden, but there's no student loan forgiveness that's in your infrastructure plan. So what's the point at this point? So again, a lot of young Black voters may be single issue voters, and they may feel that they may feel really disenchanted with the process. So how does that play out for the future? We have to let it, I say it's going to be really interesting because Florida is very deeply red, And you know, it just if Democrats do not speak more, and not just the national party, but the state party. Many ask, what is the state Democratic Party doing? You know, and so if the state Democratic Party, you don't really hear a peep from them. If they're not doing anything, it's just going to continue to be a bloodbath for Democrats as it pertains to young Black voters.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for the insight.
Lynn, that's all I see on this end. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more here in the Oak Room.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. I, like many people, sat through all of Colin Powell's funeral, and I found it totally moving. I mean, really on every level, his family, his life, his humility, his determination. And I think the impact was across color. I don't think, I think I wasn't alone. What I'm wondering is, did he make a stand for the military as a way of relatively debt-free moving through a career and living a life of service and leadership? It is an alternative and an important one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, I do agree the Colin Powell funeral was very moving and motivating. Now, what I will say is that, again, this is something that's really playing out between Black voters, activists, and the thing is that, while people respect General Powell, the thing about it is that many don't really feel a connection to him because, again, his roots are in Jamaica, like his lineage runs through Jamaica. So, his lineage is not through that of enslaved Africans who were enslaved in America, right? So that's the disconnect. And then two, at the end of the day, General Powell, a great person, great guy, but he was Republican, and so many don't feel that. And although later in life, I think he did speak to racial issues. But, in his heyday in the 80s, I mean, he was aligned with George H.W. Bush. And H.W. Bush does not have a sterling reputation in the Black community. You can start for a bevy of reasons, one being the Iran-Contra affair, which helped usher in the crack cocaine into our community by the Metroton. So by association, many young people don't know who Colin Powell is, and many older Black people, while they respect his military service and his leadership, they didn't really latch on to him like that because of his alignment with Reagan and H.W. Bush. So that's that's the gist of it.
I have a question before we end. I think if I remember correctly, Donald Trump in 2020 got a higher percentage of Black votes than he did in 2016. And there's still quite a few, even though the majority of Black voters who are women and men, of course, voted for Democrats and not Republicans in the presidential election, there's still some percentage that's not insignificant that voted for Donald Trump. So could you explain what the attraction to Donald Trump is?
I think that before Donald Trump ran for office, many Black people didn't have a problem with Donald Trump. In fact, many Black people, I don't want to say identified with him, but they admired his swagger. A swaggerific guy, has lots of money, tell it like it is. He was even in NAACP had him for a couple of not NAACP, I'm sorry. It was Sharpton had appeared with him a couple of times in the 90s. He wasn't seen as a bad guy in the 90s. You know, he wasn't seen as a guy that was racist or anything like that. It wasn't until, you know, he started running for office, you know, that, you know, it was like, oh, wow, you know. But to your point, as far as, you know, Black people voting for him, I think there's several layers to that. But I think one of the layers is that I don't think a lot of Black people in general have a problem with Republicans per se. It's just more so of the Republican platform, because many Black people, quiet as it's kept, many Black people are very conservative, especially in the South. You know, many Black people, you know, especially when it comes to cultural issues, kitchen table issues, even issues regarding economic issues. You know, many white liberals misinterpret Black people as being socialists or for those type of programs, and that's really not the case. What it really is that, you know, many Black people are very conservative with their finances, and are not necessarily for a state of you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily for a situation where you just, you know, government programs here, but it's just a situation more so that the Democrats aren't necessarily castigating it, and the Republicans are really, you know, in their view, as far as their view of it. So back to the question of Donald Trump, you know, you know, he played up a certain swag, and yes, he did have racist tendencies while he was running, especially the last time in 2020 when he ran, you know, the whole stand by and stand back, while, you know, when we're talking about white supremacy, you know, that was terrible. But, you know, I think as far as in 2016, I think a lot of Black voters wasn't necessarily feeling Hillary, you know, and that's probably why and that's one of the reasons why they went for Trump. And I think in 2020, I think it was a situation of, you know, especially Black males, because only 82% of Black men voted for Biden. And that's not to say 22% voted for Trump, because many went independent, but just saying that many may have identified or not necessarily seen Trump as the boogeyman as portrayed in the media, because of especially when it comes to perception from Black men, because of, you know, the whole crime bill. They didn't really see the difference between Trump and Biden. You know, Biden had the crime bill in the 80s and in the 90s. Okay, so he actually did something that was tangible that really affected Black males, versus Trump. He talked racist, but what policies did he actually implement to really disenfranchise Black men? You know, so that's what a lot of Black males were asking themselves in this 2020 election.
Any other questions? Well, in that case, thank you so much for coming and for your presentation, and for being willing to stay on and answer all of our questions. Thank you, and have a very good weekend.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and you all have a good weekend.